Tonight, nothing more is asked of you. Rest for a while. The forest will still be here when morning comes. There is a forest at the edge of a small mountain village where the road stops being a road and becomes only a suggestion between the trees. It happens gradually, the way most true thresholds do. The packed dirt of the village lane grows softer underfoot. The last fence post, grey and leaning, gives way to a scattering of young pines that seem almost apologetic in their sparseness, as though testing whether they are allowed to be here at all. Then, without any single step announcing itself as the important one, the trees simply close overhead and the sky becomes something glimpsed rather than owned. The villagers called this place many things. The old ones call it the listening forest and say it the way one might mention a relative who has grown strange with age but is not, for that, unwelcome. The children call it the forest that never forgets, though none of them, if pressed, could say exactly who first told them this or when. Nobody calls it dangerous, and yet almost no one enters it after dark, not out of fear exactly, but out of something closer to reverence, the same instinct that keeps a person quiet in an old temple, or still in the presence of someone praying. It is autumn now, not the sharp, early autumn of a few golden leaves scattered decoratively among green, but the deeper autumn that has been arriving for weeks, patiently, the way all true seasons arrive, a little more each day, a little more brown at the edges of things, a little more gold pooling in the low afternoon light, until the whole forest seems, at certain hours, to be lit from within rather than above. The light falls now in long ribbons through branches heavy with what remains of their leaves, not the frantic, wind-torn drama of a storm's approach, but a soft and voluntary release, one leaf loosening from its stem every so often, turning once, twice, in the still air, and settling without complaint into the litter of 1,000 leaves that came before it. Somewhere deep inside this forest, a stream moves without hurry over smooth stones. It has been moving this way for longer than anyone in the village can account for. Not fast enough to be called a rushing water, not slow enough to be called still, but exactly the pace water takes when it has learned over centuries that there is no reward for arriving anywhere sooner. It murmurs the way water murmurs when it has nowhere urgent to be, a low, continuous sound, neither happy nor sad, simply present, simply itself, filling the spaces between the bird calls and the wind, the way breath fills the spaces between a person's words. At the center of this forest stands a cedar older than any memory the village keeps. No one remembers it as young. Even the oldest villager, a woman of 91 winters who still tends her own small garden with hands like folded paper, once said that her grandmother spoke of the cedar exactly as it stands now, vast, still, unmoved by the passing of any single human lifetime. Its trunk is wide enough that 3 people with linked arms could not circle it, their fingertips falling short of one another by the width of a hand. Its bark is deeply grooved, ridged and furrowed like the map of some ancient river system, and in places darker, older, where moss and lichen have made their long, unhurried homes. Its roots rise from the earth in great curved arcs, breaking the surface here and there like the knuckles of something vast and patient, half buried, half remembering how to be a tree before sinking again into ground that has known their exact shape for centuries. Beside the cedar, in a modest wooden structure with a roof of cedar shakes gone silver grey with age, lives a monk named Tao Yun. He has lived there so long that no one recalls when he arrived, only that he was already there, the way the stream was already there, the way the moss was already there, a fact of the forest rather than an event within it. He tends a small garden of moss and stone that requires, by any practical measure, almost no tending at all, and sweeps a path each morning that leads nowhere in particular, except deeper into the quiet, gathering by evening exactly the same scattering of fallen leaves it held the day before. Tao Yun does not preach. It has been many years since he last found it necessary to explain anything at length. He has come to believe, quietly, without needing anyone to agree with him, that silence answers most questions more honestly than words do, the way the forest itself answers most questions, simply by continuing to exist exactly as it is, regardless of who arrives to ask something of it. Tonight, as the sun lowers itself behind the ridge in that unhurried way it has, spilling first gold, then amber, then a deepening rose across the western sky, he sits on a smooth, flat stone near the stream, the same stone he has favored for decades, worn now into a shape that fits the particular curve of his aging spine almost exactly. He watches the light change color on the water. It is a small pleasure watching this, and he is never tired of it. The way the surface of the stream holds each color only briefly before releasing it for the next. The way a single ripple passing over a submerged stone can scatter an entire sunset into 100 small moving fragments of light before gathering it back into stillness a moment later. He is waiting, though not impatiently. Waiting, for Tao Yun, has stopped being a state of tension and become instead something closer to breathing, an activity requiring no effort, no urgency, only presence. He is only here, the way the forest itself is here, the way the cedar is here, the way the stream, in its unhurried argument with the stones, is here. A bird calls somewhere behind him, 3 notes, descending, then silence long enough that he wonders if it will call again. It does not. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of small sounds, barely below the threshold of hearing. The settling of leaves, the faint tick of the stream against a half-submerged branch, the wind moving through the higher canopy in a long, slow exhale that never quite reaches the stillness of the clearing below. Above him, near the tall grass at the stream's edge, the first firefly of the evening rises, a small, uncertain point of gold light, lifting from the shadowed blades, hanging a moment in the still air as though deciding something important, before drifting, unhurried, toward the darker line of the trees. Tao Yun watches it go the whole way, until its light is lost among the deepening shadows beneath the branches. They always come in the evening, he thinks, though the thought arrives without urgency, the way most of his thoughts arrive now, more like weather passing through him than anything he reaches for. The ones who need the forest most. He is not wrong. He has rarely been wrong about this. In all the years he has sat on this same stone, watching this same light fail this same unhurried way, he does not know yet who is coming tonight. He does not need to know. The forest does not ask him to prepare, only to remain, the way it remains for everyone, exactly as it is, exactly as it has always been, somewhere behind him, far enough that the sound has not yet reached him, but close enough that it will soon. A set of footsteps has begun on the path that leads from the village, slow and uncertain, and heavier than the person taking them, weighted with something that has, as yet, no name. The forest, as it always does, begins very quietly to listen. The stream continues its unhurried argument with the stones. The cedar continues standing exactly as it has stood for centuries. The last color drains slowly from the western sky, and the first true stars begin, one at a time, to find their old places above the canopy. And Taoyuan sits and waits and is, in every sense that matters, already home. There is nowhere to be but here. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out more slowly still. Let the evening arrive at its own unhurried pace, exactly as it always has. Her name is May, and she has walked for an hour before she realizes she has stopped crying and started simply walking. It is a strange thing, she thinks, distantly, the way grief can occupy a person so completely that even its own departure goes unnoticed for a while, the way a room can grow quiet after a long storm, and a person inside it might not register the silence until several minutes have already passed within it. The path narrows as it enters the trees, the way it always narrows for everyone who takes it, though May does not know this yet. She only knows that the village lane beneath her feet has become something softer, something that yields slightly with each step, and that somewhere behind her, the village lights have already begun to flicker on. Small, warm windows she cannot see anymore, though she can still, if she closes her eyes, picture exactly which ones belong to which houses, which hearth is being lit by which hand, which supper is being laid on which worn wooden table. She does not look back. Ahead, she is not sure what she is looking for. She only knows that the house she left behind has become, in the space of 3 days, a place she cannot yet sit inside without feeling the specific shape of its silence, the particular emptiness of a kitchen where a kettle no longer needs filling for two, a particular hush in a room where a voice, once so constant it had become like weather, has simply, entirely stopped. 3 nights ago, her mother died. The words that May said to her, in a moment of exhaustion, of grief arriving early, dressed as irritation, of fear, disguised so thoroughly as anger that May herself did not recognize it in the moment for what it was, were not cruel. They were only careless, only human. I don't have time for this right now. A small sentence, spoken in a doorway, over her shoulder, already halfway to some task she can no longer even remember the importance of. It is the kind of sentence spoken 1,000 times by 1,000 tired daughters in 1,000 doorways, on 1,000 ordinary evenings that were never meant to be anything but ordinary. But it was the last thing her mother heard her say, before the fever, already climbing, already unstoppable, though none of them yet understood this, took the rest of the night for itself. And by morning there had been no more sentences left to speak at all, only silence and a stillness in the next room that May has still not fully allowed herself to enter, even in memory. She carries this now the way a person carries a stone lodged in their shoe, not heavy enough on its own to stop the walking, but present with every single step, present in the give of the ground beneath her boot, present in the ache that has settled, low and constant, somewhere beneath her ribs, in a place she did not know could ache before this week. The forest does not ask her to explain herself. It only opens, unhurried, branch by branch, allowing her deeper. The trees drawing back slightly from the path as though making room, the light growing dimmer and more golden all at once as the canopy thickens overhead. She walks past a fallen log, soft with age, colonized by a small city of pale mushrooms. She does not have the heart, tonight, to notice properly. She walks past a boulder half swallowed by the earth, its surface a quiet tapestry of lichen, grey-green, rust-orange, the palest silver, each patch slightly different from the one beside it, though none of them announcing themselves, none of them competing for her attention. She does not notice at first that her own footprints in the soft earth behind her are already beginning to fill, almost imperceptibly, with a thin green moss, as though the ground itself is in no particular hurry to remember her exactly as she was a moment ago, exactly as heavy, exactly as grief-worn, preferring instead to soften each mark slowly into something gentler, something closer to simply ground. The moment the foot that made it has moved on, she does not notice the old man sitting by the stream until she is almost upon him. He is so still at first that she nearly mistakes him for a shape formed by shadow and stone rather than a living person. A low, seated silhouette against the last pale light on the water, unmoving, unhurried, as much a part of the clearing as the boulder beside him or the roots curling from the bank into the current. Tao Yun does not startle. He only turns his head, slowly, the way the moon turns to face a passing cloud, and looks at her with an expression that holds no surprise and no judgment. Only a quiet, patient welcome, as if he has been expecting her, not tonight specifically, but for years. In the general and unhurried way one expects weather to eventually change. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. May stands at the edge of the clearing, uncertain whether she has trespassed on something, uncertain whether she is meant to explain her presence, to apologize for it, to turn back the way she came. "You don't have to explain," he says at last, his voice soft as bark, low enough that it seems to belong to the same register as the stream itself. "The forest already knows you're tired." May sits, because her legs have decided this before the rest of her has agreed to it. A sudden, total giving way, as though some tension she did not know she was holding has simply released itself the moment she heard those words. For a long while, neither of them speaks again. The stream continues its unhurried argument with the stones, indifferent to the particular grief that has just arrived at its edge, and yet, in its own wordless way, entirely accommodating of it. Somewhere above, an owl shifts its weight on a branch she cannot see. The small sound of feathers against bark barely audible, watching without watching, the way old trees watch, the way old rivers watch, the way anything watches that has stopped needing to have an opinion about what it sees. The light continues to fail, slowly, by degrees. The gold on the water deepens to amber, then to a soft rose grey, then finally to the deep blue-black of true evening, and still neither of them moves to break the silence, because the silence, May realizes distantly, is not asking to be broken. It is only asking to be shared. "I said something I can't take back," she says finally, to no one, to everyone, to the stream and the stones and the old man beside her, the words arriving smaller than she expected them to, smaller than the weight they have carried inside her chest for 3 days. Tao Yun know these, once slowly, as if this is the most natural sentence in the world, as ordinary in its own way, as the sound of water over stone. "Neither can the stream," he says, nodding toward the dark water where the last pale reflection of the sky is dissolving into deeper shadow. Every leaf that falls into it moves on before it can ask forgiveness of the branch that let it go. And yet, the branch does not despair. Come morning, it simply, in its own time, grows another leaf. May does not understand yet, not fully, not in the way that would let the word settle the ache beneath her ribs. But she does not need to. Not tonight. She only needs, for now, a place to sit where no one asks her to feel differently than she feels, where the silence around her is not an accusation but a kind of company. The night deepens around them. The stream continues. Somewhere in the high branches, the first stars visible through gaps in the canopy blink slowly into being, one at a time, patient, unhurried, exactly as they have every night for as long as this forest has stood. In the morning, though morning here arrives gently, more a softening of grey than a sudden gold, the darkness thinning by degrees the way tea lightens when water is slowly added. Tao Yun rises from wherever he has slept, unhurried, and walks his usual path around the cedar, sweeping leaves that will only fall again by evening. May watches him from where she slept, curled at the base of a mossy stone, her cloak damp with dew that has settled overnight on every surface of the clearing, beading along the edges of leaves, gathering in the small cupped centers of curled bark, darkening the earth beneath her into a deeper, richer brown than it wore the evening before. She watches the broom move, a simple bundle of twigs bound to a worn wooden handle, sweeping the same stretch of path in the same unhurried arc, gathering a scattering of leaves that, she can already tell, will be replaced by evening with an almost identical scattering, fallen from the same branches, settling in nearly the same places. "Why do you sweep?" she asks, her voice still rough with sleep and the ache that has not left her chest, if it only needs sweeping again. Tao Yun continues his slow arc with the broom, the motion so practiced it requires, visibly, no thought at all, an act performed with the whole unhurried attention of his body rather than his mind. "Why do you breathe?" he says, without pausing. "If you will only need to breathe again." She has no answer, and he does not seem to want one. He finishes his arc, sets the broom against the cedar's great trunk, and looks toward the eastern sky, where the grey is beginning, very slowly, to take on the faintest hint of color. Not yet gold, only a suggestion of gold, the way a held breath is only a suggestion of the exhale to come. Later, as the light climbs higher and the mist that clung low to the stream begins to thin and lift, he brings her to a place a short way from the clearing where the earth is soft and dark, threaded through with a fine even green. "Look," he says, kneeling with the slow care of old joints, his robe pooling around him on the damp ground. She looks. At first, she sees only moss, a fine, unremarkable carpet of it, spreading across a wide flat stone, and the ground surrounding it, each individual strand so small it is difficult to distinguish where one ends and the next begins. The whole surface soft as fur beneath even a passing glance. This is where a woman sat 40 years ago, Tao Yun says, his voice quiet, matched to the stillness of the clearing. She had done something she believed unforgivable. I do not know myself what it was. She never told me, and I never asked. She sat here for 3 days. Her footprints were deep. Grief makes the whole body heavier than it is, and heaviness leaves a mark that lighter feet never would. May looks down at the soft green surface, trying without success to see the footprints she has just been told once existed there. There is only moss, patient even, undisturbed. Where did they go? She asks. Nowhere, he says. They are still here. The moss does not erase them. It grows over them, the way understanding grows over guilt, not by pretending the mark was never made, not by insisting the ground was always this smooth, but by becoming something soft enough to live gently on top of it, season after season, without needing to remove what came before. He reaches out and touches the moss gently, his weathered fingers moving briefly across its surface, the way one might touch a scar that has healed but not vanished, with a familiarity that suggests he has done this many times before, in many mornings not unlike this one. The forest does not forget what people bring into it, he says, but it does not ask them to carry it forever either. It only asks them to let something new grow, in its own time, at its own pace. Never sooner than the ground is ready, never later than it needs to be. May is quiet for a long time. Somewhere above them, a woodpecker begins its slow, deliberate work on a distant trunk, a rhythm that seems, in the stillness of the morning, almost like punctuation, marking the silence rather than breaking it. And if the moss doesn't grow, she asks finally, if the footprint just stays? Tao Yun looks at her, and for the first time since she arrived, something like sorrow crosses his old face. Brief, passing, like a single cloud crossing the cedar's high crown before the sun finds its way through again. Then a person stops walking, he says, and that is the only real punishment there ever is. Not the mark itself, only the staying still. The moss cannot grow over a footprint that refuses to age into the past. A print pressed fresh into the earth every morning by the same foot, returning again and again to stand in exactly the same place, refusing to let even one day's distance settle over it. He is quiet a moment, letting this settle the way morning light settles slowly across a clearing, filling it corner by corner rather than all at once. I have seen it happen, he adds, more softly. Not often, but I have seen a person choose, out of some private loyalty to their own guilt, to keep the print sharp rather than let it soften. It is a difficult thing to watch. Harder, I think, than watching someone simply carry a heavy grief and slowly set it down. Acme considers this in silence, watching a single beam of early light find its way through the canopy and settle briefly on the mossy stone before her, illuminating for just a moment the fine textures she had not noticed before. Tiny upright stems, each no taller than a fingernail, clustered so densely they seem from any distance like a single unbroken surface, rather than the countless small lives they actually are. And if the moss doesn't grow because the ground isn't ready, she asks, not because someone refuses, only because it's still too soon. Tao Yun's expression softens further. Then the forest waits, he says simply. It has never once, in all the years I have tended it, grown impatient with someone's grief. It only continues to be here, exactly as patient tomorrow as it is today, for as many tomorrows as it takes. He rises slowly, brushing dirt from his knees, and gestures, not urgently, only as an invitation for her to keep walking with him, deeper into the morning, deeper into the forest that has already begun, quietly, to hold her the way it has held so many others before her. The path ahead remains soft with dew, unhurried, open. They reach the old cedar as the light begins to soften toward midday, and then, almost without anyone noticing the turn, toward afternoon, the sun climbing high enough to lose its long morning slant, then beginning, imperceptibly, its slow decline toward evening once more. Up close, the tree is even larger than it seemed from a distance. Its bark is deeply grooved, furrowed in long vertical channels that catch the light differently depending on the angle of approach. Pale grey-brown where the sun finds it directly. Deep charcoal in the folds where shadow gathers and stays. Its lowest branches are thick as a grown man's waist, reaching outward before curving gently upward, as though the tree, at some point centuries ago, decided that growing wide was as important as growing tall. Its crown is lost somewhere above the surrounding canopy, gathering whatever sky it can find, indifferent to whether anyone below can see where it ends. Sit with it a while, Tao Yun says, and does not explain further. He settles himself a short distance away, on a route that curves conveniently into something like a low seat, and closes his eyes, leaving May to decide on her own what closeness she is ready for. May sits at the cedar's base, her back against the rough bark, and does not know what she is supposed to feel. She had expected, perhaps, some immediate sense of peace, some visible shift in the ache beneath her ribs. Instead, there is only the tree, vast, patient, entirely unconcerned with whether she understands anything at all. Nothing happens for a long time. The forest continues being a forest around her. A woodpecker somewhere far off taps its slow rhythm into a dead branch, pauses, resumes. Two birds she cannot name call back and forth across the clearing in short, overlapping phrases that never quite become a conversation and never quite become silence either. The stream keeps its endless, patient argument with the stones, its sound rising and falling slightly as the breeze shifts through the clearing. She notices the small things, gradually, the way a person notices details in a room they have sat in for a long while without truly looking. A beetle making its slow, deliberate way up a groove in the bark beside her shoulder. A spider's web strung between two low branches, nearly invisible except where a single strand catches the light and holds it, briefly, like a thread of silver. The particular smell of the cedar itself, resinous, faintly sweet, undercut by the deeper, cooler smell of the moss and damp earth at its roots. She notices, eventually, a scar along the trunk, old, healed over, where lightning must have struck it once, long before she was born, long perhaps before her grandmother was born. The bark has grown around the wound in soft, overlapping folds, like a wave frozen mid-motion, the new growth curling inward from both sides of the old injury until the two edges nearly, but not quite, meet. It didn't die, she says quietly to herself, to the tree, to no one in particular. No, says Tao Yun, who has settled nearby without her noticing exactly when he opened his eyes again. But it also didn't pretend it wasn't struck. It carries the mark plainly on the outside, where anyone who looks closely enough can see it. And still it grows. Every year a little taller, a little wider, the mark itself slowly becoming just one part of a much larger shape. May reaches out and touches the scar. The bark there is warm from the afternoon sun, rough beneath her fingers in a way that feels oddly comforting, solid, undeniable, present. My mother had a scar like this, she says after a moment. On her hand, from a kitchen accident when I was small. A pot of boiling water, tipped the wrong way. I used to trace it when I was little, while she told me stories at night. I liked the shape of it. I never once thought of it as something sad. Then you already know, Tao Yun says gently, that a scar and a story can live in the same place, that the mark and the memory it carries do not have to be only grief. Sometimes they are also warmth. Sometimes they are also the sound of a voice telling a story. Late at night, with a small hand tracing an old wound as though it was something precious rather than something to hide. May's eyes fill, but she does not look away from the tree, does not wipe at the tears the way she might have 3 days ago in front of anyone else. I keep thinking if I could just go back, she starts. The tree cannot go back either. Tao Yun interrupts, gently, not unkindly. It cannot unmake the lightning. It cannot choose, even now, centuries later, to have been struck somewhere else, or not at all. It can only keep being a tree, in the specific way that includes having been struck once, long ago, on a night no one remembers anymore, except the tree itself. He is quiet a moment, watching a firefly rise early from the shade beneath the roots, the first of the evening, though the light has not yet fully faded, drifting upward in slow, uncertain arcs, as though testing whether it is truly time yet. You are still becoming who you will be, he says. The sentence you spoke to your mother is part of that becoming now, not the whole of it, only part. The same way the lightning is only part of what this tree is, a large part, some days, a smaller part, other days, but never in either case, the entire tree. May closes her eyes and leans her head back against the bark, feeling its texture press faintly into her scalp, feeling the particular quality of the light change against her closed eyelids as a cloud, somewhere far above the canopy, passes briefly across the sun. For the first time in 3 days, she allows herself to simply exist inside her grief, without trying to escape it, without trying to explain it away, without trying to make it smaller or larger than it actually is. She only sits. She only breathes. The tree, unhurried, holds its own long silence beside her, the way it has held so many silences before hers, and will hold so many after. The forest holds them both there, unhurried, patient, exactly as long as they need. By evening, clouds have gathered low over the ridge, not the dramatic, darkening mass of a true storm, but a softer, greyer weight, settling over the treetops, the way a blanket settles over a shoulder. The first rain of the season begins not long after, gentle at first, barely a whisper against the highest leaves, a sound so soft that May, sitting beneath the cedar's wide canopy, mistakes it at first for wind. Then it deepens, steadily, filling the forest with a low, constant hush, thousands of small sounds joining together into one continuous, textured silence, the way individual voices join into a single murmur in a crowded room. Each drop finds its own particular leaf, its own particular blade of grass, its own particular stretch of bare earth, and the whole forest seems, for a while, to be made entirely of this soft, unbroken sound. Mei has not moved from beneath the cedar's canopy, which shelters her from the worst of it. The branches so dense overhead that only the occasional drop finds its way down to her, cool and sudden against her cheek or the back of her hand. She watches the rain fall beyond the edge of the branches, silver threads catching what little grey light remains, each one visible for only a moment before vanishing into the deepening dark of the ground below. Tao Yun stands at the edge of the shelter, palm open to the falling water, his sleeve already darkening where the rain has found it. "Come," he says, "just for a moment." Mi hesitates. The idea of stepping out from beneath the branches, of allowing the cold to find her directly, feels, for a moment, like more exposure than she is ready for. But something in his voice, patient without pressure, makes her rise anyway and step out from beneath the branches, letting the rain find her shoulders, her hair, the collar of her cloak. It is cold and clean and entirely without malice. It does not feel as she half expected it might, like an assault. It feels instead like something almost gentle, insistent, but not unkind, the way a firm hand on a shoulder can be both undeniable and entirely without threat. "Does it wash it away?" she asks, water already running in small rivulets down the side of her face. "What I did?" Tao Yun tilts his face upward, eyes closed, rain running down the deep lines of his cheeks, gathering at his chin, falling in small, steady drops onto the dark fabric of his robe. "No," he says, "rain does not erase anything. Ask the mountain. It has been rained on for 10,000 years, and it is still exactly the shape its whole history made it. Every storm it has ever weathered is still, in some sense, present in the particular slope of its ridges, the particular scatter of its stones." He opens his eyes and looks at her, water still running freely down his face, unwiped, unminded. But the mountain is not the same shape it would have been without the rain either. Every drop softens something, somewhere, however small. Every drop moves something, a single grain at a time, toward becoming a slightly different mountain than it was the day before. The mountain does not resist this. It has never once, in 10,000 years, tried to remain exactly as it was. May lets the water run down her face, indistinguishable now from whatever tears remain in her, the two things merging into a single cold, clean, ongoing wetness. She no longer feels the need to separate or explain. "So I don't get to be who I was before," she says. "Before I said it." "No one does," Tao Yun says simply. "Not you, not me, not the mountain, not the cedar. That is not a punishment. That is only what it means to be alive inside time, which moves in one direction and does not, however much we ask it to, ever move backward. But you also don't have to stay exactly the shape that moment left you in. the rain is still falling. It will keep falling on and off for as long as you live, softening you a little every time, whether or not you notice it happening. They stand together a while longer, in the hush and the cold and the clean falling dark, saying nothing further, needing nothing further. The rain continues its steady, patient work on the leaves, the moss, the bark of the great cedar, the two figures standing quietly at its edge. Somewhere above the clouds, though neither of them can see it, the moon continues on its own unhurried path, exactly as it always has, exactly as it will continue to, long after this particular rain has passed, long after this particular grief has softened into something May can carry differently. Eventually, the rain begins to ease, not stopping all at once, but thinning gradually, the way it began, until only the occasional drop still finds its way down through the canopy, tapping softly against a leaf, then silence, then another drop, further apart now until even those grow rare, and the forest settles back into its low, constant murmur of stream and wind and distant, settling leaves. 2 nights later, nights during which May has stayed on in the forest, unwilling yet to return to a house grown strange with silence, sleeping now in a small hollow near the upper bend of the stream that Tao Yun showed her, sheltered and dry. Another set of footsteps finds the path into the forest. They are heavier than May's were, and slower, belonging to an old farmer named Wen, whose knees ache with the coming winter the way old joints always seem to know a season before the calendar admits it, and whose chest aches with something far older than any winter, something that has been accumulating quietly for most of his adult life. 40 years ago, Wen borrowed a sum of rice and silver from his closest friend, a debt taken not lightly, but out of genuine desperation to save his family's failing farm in a season when the rains had come too late and then too hard, drowning half of what little the earlier drought had spared. He promised to repay it within a season. The season came and went. The debt did not shrink. If anything, it seemed in Wen's mind to grow larger with every month of his continuing failure to address it, until the shame of the unpaid sum became itself a second debt, heavier in some ways than the first. He stopped visiting, not out of malice, not out of any decision made consciously, but the way a person stops doing many difficult things, gradually, through 1,000 small avoidances, each one easier than the last, until an entire friendship has been quietly abandoned without either party ever explicitly ending it. His friend died 11 years ago, still technically owed, though he had long since stopped expecting payment, and, as far as anyone in the village knew, in the scattered, half-remembered way villages know such things, had long since stopped resenting Wen for it too. It was Wen alone, it seemed, who had never once stopped carrying the weight of what he owed. He walks now with a small cloth bundle of silver coins clutched against his chest, wrapped carefully, tied twice for security, the coins themselves a decades-late gesture, offered now only to the friend's grown son, who Wen has heard, through the same slow village channels, still lives at the forest's far edge, tending the same modest fields his father once tended. But Wen has taken a wrong turn somewhere in the dark. His eyes are not what they once were, and the path, unfamiliar to him after so many years spent deliberately avoiding this whole stretch of the mountain, has folded back on itself more than once in ways he did not expect. He finds himself now, not at any farmhouse, but deep among unfamiliar trees, his lantern guttering low, its oil nearly spent, his old legs trembling with more than just the cold of the night air settling around him. He sits, finally, on a fallen log, its bark soft and pale with age, half swallowed already by the same patient moss that has claimed so much else in this forest, and does not move for a long while, only breathes, hard and uneven, listening to the strange new sounds of trees he does not recognize, insects he cannot name, a stream somewhere nearby, whose voice is entirely unfamiliar to him. It is Tao Yun who finds him, appearing from the dark the way he seems to everyone who meets him this way, to simply arrive rather than approach. No sound of footsteps announcing him beforehand, no rustle of disturbed undergrowth. "You're lost," Tao Yun says. Not a question, only an observation, offered with no judgment attached to it at all. "I have been lost for 40 years, Wen says, and does not seem surprised, even in his exhaustion, even in the strangeness of speaking to a stranger in the dark, to be saying this aloud for what feels like the first time. This is only the part where my feet finally noticed." Tao Yun sits beside him on the log without hurry, settling his robes around him, and for a while says nothing at all, only lets the silence of the forest close gently around the two of them, lets the old farmer's breathing slow, by degrees, beneath the simple weight of being witnessed rather than judged, beneath the strange relief of a silence that asks nothing of him at all. The lantern in Wen's lap gutters once more and goes out entirely, its oil finally spent. Neither of them moves to relight it. There is, it turns out, enough moonlight filtering down through the canopy to see the shapes of things well enough. The pale curve of the log, the dark mass of trees surrounding them, the old farmer's hunched shoulders, slowly beginning to loosen. "I don't know the way from here," Wen admits, after a long while, his voice smaller than it was. "I know it," Tao Yun says simply, "but there is no need to walk it tonight. The forest will still be here in the morning. So will the path. So most likely will the man you are looking for." Wen's hands tighten briefly around the silver bundle in his lap, an old, reflexive grip, born of 40 years spent guarding this particular weight against loss, against theft, against anything that might take from him the one gesture he has finally worked up the courage to make. "I've carried this so long," he says quietly. "I'm afraid if I stop moving toward him, even for one night, I'll lose the courage to keep going." Tao Yun is quiet a moment, considering this with the same unhurried attention he gives everything. "Courage does not usually leave all at once," he says finally. "It is more like a lantern's oil. It burns low sometimes and needs rest before it can be trusted to burn steadily again. One night's rest is unlikely to extinguish 40 years of finally deciding to come. If anything, I think you will find the courage waiting for you in the morning, a little steadier for having been allowed to rest." Something in Wen's shoulders eases slightly at this. Not fully, not all the way, but enough that his grip on the bundle loosens by a fraction, enough that his breathing, for the first time since he wandered off the path, begins to slow towards something closer to rest. Wen wakes at first light, stiff and cold, his old joints protesting the night spent on hard ground, though he finds, to his surprise, that he has slept, not deeply, not without waking twice to the strange sounds of an unfamiliar forest settling around him, but slept nonetheless, more restfully than he expected, given the weight still resting in his lap. Tao Yun is already awake when Wen opens his eyes, sitting a short distance away on a low stone, watching the grey light strengthen slowly over the canopy. He says nothing at first, only waits, the way he waits for everything, until Wen has fully returned to his own body, until the last traces of sleep have cleared from his old eyes. "Come," Tao Yun says eventually. "There is something I would like you to see before you continue on." He leads Wen a short distance, along a path damp with the night's dew, to the stream, the same stream where Mei sat only days before, though neither Wen nor Tao Yun will ever mention this coincidence, and Wen would have no way of knowing it regardless. The water here runs wide and shallow over a bed of smooth, pale stones, its surface catching the strengthening morning light in 1,000 small, moving fragments. "Watch the leaves," Tao Yun says, gesturing toward the surface, where a scattering of red and gold drifts past, unhurried, carried by a current too gentle to call urgent, each leaf turning slowly as it moves, catching the light differently with every rotation. Wen watches, saying nothing, his breath still visible faintly in the cool morning air. A leaf catches briefly on a smooth stone near the bank, spins once, twice, and releases, continuing on its way downstream without any apparent distress at the brief delay. Each one fell from a branch that could not hold it forever, Tao Yun says, his voice matching the unhurried pace of the water itself. Not because the branch failed in some way, only because holding forever was never what a leaf was for. The branch does its work all summer, and then when autumn comes, it lets go. Not out of cruelty, only out of the simple, necessary rhythm of what a tree must do to survive its own winter. Wen's hands, still clutching the cloth bundle of silver even now, tighten reflexively. "I owed him," he says, his voice rough. "I owe him still. A debt doesn't stop existing because the person it's owed to is gone. If anything, it only grows heavier, because now there's no way left to settle it properly. No way to look him in the eye and say, 'I'm sorry,' and mean it, and have him hear it." "No," Tao Yun agrees quietly. "But look again at the leaf. It does not carry guilt for leaving the branch that grew it. It also does not refuse to fall, out of some misplaced loyalty to a branch it can no longer serve in the way it once did. It simply becomes, instead, part of the water's whole ongoing journey, contributing what it still has to give. Shade to a fish resting beneath a stone, perhaps, or nourishment to a riverbank further down that it will never see, never know it has fed." They stand together for a while, watching more leaves pass, some catching briefly on stones, some moving swiftly through faster currents near the center, all of them eventually continuing on, none of them lingering longer than the water allowed. Wen kneels stiffly at the water's edge, his old knees protesting audibly, and takes one small silver coin from the bundle, turning it over in his weathered fingers, feeling its familiar weight, the worn edges softened by decades of handling. His son is still out there, he says, more to himself than to Tao Yun. Somewhere at the forest's edge. I've heard he kept the farm going, kept it exactly as his father would have wanted, from what little I've heard. Then that is where your debt is still alive, Tao Yun says. Not in the ground where your friend is buried, not in the 40 years you spent avoiding this path, not even in the guilt you have carried so faithfully all this time. Only there, in a son who is still breathing, still tending fields, still capable of receiving whatever you have left to give him. He places a hand briefly on Wen's shoulder, the lightest touch, barely more than the passing of a bird's shadow across the ground, there and then gone. The forest does not ask you to fix the past, he says. No one can fix the past. That is simply not among the things time allows. It only asks whether there is anything left in the present that you can still offer honestly to someone still capable of receiving it. Wen looks at the coin in his palm for a long moment, then at the water, still carrying its leaves past them in that same unhurried procession. Then, finally, toward the direction Tao Yun gently indicates with a small tilt of his chin, a path leading east, out toward the fields at the far edge of the trees, where the morning light is already beginning to spread gold across whatever crops remain. Standing this late in the season, for the first time in 11 years, since the day he heard, second-hand, through a traveling merchant, that his old friend had died, something in Wen's chest loosens, not fully, not all at once, but enough that his next breath comes slightly easier than the one before it. Enough that when he rises again from the water's edge, his legs, though still old, though still aching, feel somehow more capable of carrying him the rest of the way. Before Wen leaves the clearing to make his way east, he lingers one more night beneath the trees, unable yet to make the final walk toward the farmhouse in what remains of the day's light, telling himself he needs the rest, though some quieter part of him suspects he needs more than rest, simply a little more time to gather whatever courage the night has restored to him. He sits near the base of the great cedar as the light fades once more into evening, the silver bundle resting beside him now, rather than clutched against his chest. And it is here, in the deepening blue-grey of dusk, that he first notices the owl, a broad, silent shape perched on a low branch just above his head, arrived without any sound at all, as though it has simply always been there, and he is only now, belatedly, seeing it. Its eyes are large and round, catching what little light remains in the clearing, and they do not blink, do not look away. They only rest on him, steady, unhurried, the way the moon might watch a passing cloud, with total, undivided attention and absolutely no opinion attached to that attention at all. "What does it want?" Wen asks Tao Yun, who has settled nearby, mending by feel more than sight in the fading light, a small tear along the hem of his robe. "Nothing," Tao Yun says, his needle continuing its slow, patient work. That's rather the whole of its gift, if you want to call it that. It watches everything that passes through this forest, every mistake, every kindness, every hesitation, every quiet, private grief that arrives here in the dark, and it asks nothing of any of it. It does not tally what it sees. It does not remember tomorrow what frightened it, or moved it, or surprised it, tonight. Wen studies the bird's still, golden eyes for a long moment, feeling, despite himself, an old and familiar unease stirring somewhere beneath his ribs. The specific discomfort of being looked at, of being seen clearly, that he has spent 40 years arranging his whole life around avoiding. "I've spent 40 years imagining eyes like that," he admits, quietly, surprising himself with the honesty of it. Watching me, waiting for me to fail again, the way I failed him. Except, in my imagining, they were always angry, always accusing. I built a whole private courtroom in my head and populated it with a single unblinking witness and sentenced myself in it over and over for 4 decades. "Whose eyes were those, really?" Tao Yun asks quietly, his hands pausing on the mending for just a moment. Wen is silent a long while, watching the owl, which continues its patient, unbothered vigil above him, entirely unmoved by the weight of the confession being made beneath its branch. "Mine," he says finally. "I think they were always only ever mine." He never once, that I know of, looked at me that way. Even after I stopped visiting, even after all those years of silence. I only assumed he must have, because I could not imagine anyone forgiving what I had done to him, to our friendship, by simply disappearing rather than facing him. "The forest does not watch you the way you have watched yourself," Tao Yun says gently. "It only watches the way that owl does, without a verdict, only witness. It has seen a great many things pass beneath these branches over the years, griefs far heavier than yours, and lighter ones too, and it has never once, in all that time, needed to judge a single one of them in order to simply see them clearly." Wen closes his eyes, feeling the cool evening air settle around him, feeling, for the first time in longer than he can accurately remember, the particular relief of being observed without being condemned. The owl shifts once on its branch, a small rustle of feathers against bark, and settles again into its stillness, entirely unmoved by the confession it has just witnessed, which is, in its own quiet way, exactly the point, exactly the gift it has to offer anyone patient enough to sit beneath it long enough to understand. Wen sleeps that night without dreaming of a debt for the first time in longer than he can remember. His breathing slow and even beneath the great cedar's sheltering branches, the silver bundle resting quietly beside him, the owl keeping its silent, judgment-free watch above them both until well past moonrise. There is a story the forest keeps about Tao Yun himself, though he has never told it in full to anyone who has passed through, and no one currently living remembers hearing it from him directly, in his own words, spoken plainly the way he speaks of moss or rain or the slow patience of stones. It is said, in the scattered, half-remembered way villages hold onto such things, passed down more as feeling than fact, that he arrived at this forest as a young man many decades ago, having left behind a village not unlike the one at the base of this same mountain. It is said that in that other village, in a dispute over land whose details have long since blurred into rumor, he struck another man in anger, hard enough that the man never fully recovered the use of one arm. It is said that Tao Yun fled that same night, unable to face what he had done, unable to imagine facing the man's family or his own, and that he wandered for the better part of a year before this forest somehow allowed him to stop wandering, before something in this particular clearing, beside this particular stream, beneath this particular cedar, told him, without words, that he was permitted to finally set down whatever he had been carrying across all those miles. Whether any of this is entirely true, no one can say with certainty. Tao Yun himself has never confirmed it, nor denied it, to anyone who has asked, and few have asked, sensing correctly that it is not a story he offers easily. But those who look closely enough, on quiet evenings, can sometimes see the old monk pause near a particular bend in the stream, always the same bend, always at roughly the same hour, and touch 2 fingers briefly to his own forearm and say nothing at all. His face, for just that moment, unreadable in a way it almost never is. Tonight, as Wen sleeps peacefully beneath the cedar for what is, by any account, the most restful night he has had in years, Tao Yun sits alone by the water, watching the current the way he has watched it for decades, patiently, without asking it to move any faster than it already does, without needing it to explain itself, without needing anything from it at all beyond its simple, continuous presence. "You never went back," says a voice, though there is no one else nearby to have spoken it aloud. It is only his own thought, arriving the way thoughts sometimes do, late in the quiet of a long evening, dressed up as a question posed by someone else. The way old, well-worn thoughts often disguise themselves as new ones, simply to be considered again. "No," he answers himself, aloud, to the stream, his voice quiet enough that it barely disturbs the water's own sound. "But I stayed here, and every person who has ever needed this forest since, every May, every Wen, every traveler whose name I will learn only when they are ready to give it, I have tried to meet the way I wished someone had met me, on the night I could not stop walking, on the night I believed, wrongly, that there was no forest anywhere large enough to hold what I had done." The stream does not answer, of course. It only continues, carrying what it carries, a single leaf, released some distance upstream, now drifting past him in the dark, catching what little moonlight filters down through the canopy, releasing what it releases, exactly as it always has, indifferent to whether anyone is watching, indifferent to whether its patient, ongoing motion means anything to the old man seated at its edge. Perhaps that is answer enough. Tao Yun has come, over many years, to believe that it is. That the stream's unbothered continuation, night after night, decade after decade, is itself a kind of teaching, offered without words, without judgment, without anything resembling a lesson delivered on purpose. It simply continues. And in its continuing, it shows him again and again exactly what he has spent his own long life trying to offer to everyone who finds their way into this forest. That a thing can carry what it carries and still keep moving. He sits a while longer, listening to Wen's slow, even breathing carrying faintly across the clearing, listening to the stream, listening to the wind stirring gently, high in the cedar's crown, before he too, eventually, settles into the particular stillness that passes, for him now, as sleep, not deep, not unbroken, but restful enough, familiar enough, after so many years of practice. The third traveler arrives several nights later and arrives differently than the other two, without a lantern at all, preferring the dark, as though light might reveal more of him than he is prepared, even now, even after everything, to have revealed. His name is Kai, and he was once a soldier in a border conflict now, 3 years ended. 3 years that have not, despite their passing, brought him any closer to feeling that the conflict is, in any meaningful sense, actually over. He has walked farther than either may or when to reach this forest, from a city 2 provinces away, where he could no longer sleep in rooms with doors that locked, could no longer stand loud. Sudden noises without his whole body flooding with an old and useless readiness, could no longer look too long at his own hands without a familiar tightness rising in his chest. He does not know why he chose this particular mountain, this particular stretch of trees, out of all the forests he might have chosen. Only that a fellow veteran, met briefly and by chance at a roadside inn some weeks back, mentioned once, almost in passing, that there was a forest somewhere in the north where a certain kind of quiet could be found that could be found nowhere else. A quiet, the man had said, that did not ask anything of you, that did not require you to explain yourself before it would let you rest. Kai has done things in war that he has told no one, not his family, not the few friends who survived alongside him and scattered afterward to different corners of the country, not even fully himself, in the sense that he has never once let the memories finish forming into complete sentences. They arrive instead as fragments, a sound, a color, the specific weight of something in his hands, never as a story he could tell from beginning to end, because to tell it that way would require him to sit with all of it at once, in the correct order, and he has not in 3 years found himself able to do that. He enters the trees near midnight, moving the way he was trained to move, silent, watchful, weight distributed evenly, expecting danger from every shadow, though the only danger present here is the one he has carried in with him, folded small and dense somewhere beneath his ribs. It is the owl that finds him first, the same broad, patient shape that watched over Wen days before, or perhaps a different one, gliding low and silent between the trunks, close enough that Kai freezes instinctively, his hand going before he can stop it, to a knife he no longer carries, has not carried in over a year, and yet whose absence his hand seems not to have fully registered even now. The bird does not attack. It only settles on a branch a short distance ahead of him and watches, unblinking, the way it has watched so many others before him. Kai stands very still for a long time, breathing hard, waiting for the old readiness in his body to subside, a process that used to take seconds back when the war was still happening, and now in peace takes considerably longer. His body apparently unconvinced that peace is a state it is permitted to trust. It is Tao Yun's voice, quiet and unhurried, that finally reaches him from somewhere in the dark ahead, arriving with no visible source, the old monk himself still invisible among the shadowed trunks. "You don't have to be ready for anything tonight," the old monk says. "There is nothing here that requires defending against." Kai's hand slowly lowers from where it had reached for a weapon that is not there, though the motion takes longer than he would like, his body releasing the old posture reluctantly, a fraction at a time. "I don't know how to stop," he says. To the dark, to the voice, to no one in particular, his own voice rough with an exhaustion that goes far deeper than 3 years of missed sleep. I don't know how to just stop. My body doesn't seem to believe it's allowed. Then don't yet, Tao Yun says simply, his voice carrying no impatience, no urgency at all. Just walk a little further. The forest is patient. It has waited a very long time for people far more frightened than you currently are. It will let you stop when your body finally believes it is allowed to, and not one moment before. And that is entirely acceptable. Kai does not sleep that first night, though he sits, eventually, beneath the great cedar as the others did before him. His back rigid against the bark, spine held in the careful, ready posture of a man who has spent 3 years unable to fully trust the ground beneath him, eyes open to the dark canopy above, watching for movement that does not come. Tao Yun settles a short distance away, not too close, sensing correctly that closeness, tonight, would only add to the tension already coiled through Kai's shoulders. He says nothing for a long while, only sits, matching, without announcing that he is doing so. The quality of the silence to what Kai seems able to bear, not the warm, companionable quiet he offered May, not the gentle, encouraging silence he offered Wen, but something more careful, more spacious, giving Kai room enough to simply exist without any expectation placed upon him at all. The hours pass slowly. The moon rises higher, its light shifting gradually across the clearing, illuminating first one root, then another. Then the pale undersides of leaves stirred by a breeze too faint to properly call wind. An owl calls once, distantly, from somewhere beyond the clearing. Not the same owl that has watched over each traveler so far, or perhaps the very same one, ranging further tonight, its voice low and resonant, fading quickly into the deeper dark. It is well past midnight when the fireflies begin to rise in earnest, dozens of them at first, emerging from the grass and low brush around the clearing's edge. Then what seems, within a few more minutes, like hundreds, small gold lights lifting and drifting through the black air like slow, wandering thoughts, finally given the mercy of a body, however brief, however small. Kai watches them, at first without any visible reaction at all, his face still held in the same tight, watchful stillness. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something in his posture begins to change, his shoulders lowering by some small fraction, his breath, still shallow, growing very slightly deeper. They only carry a little light, Tao Yun says, after a long while, his voice pitched low, careful not to break whatever fragile thread has begun, quietly, to loosen something in a younger man beside him. Not enough to illuminate the whole forest, not enough even to illuminate very much of anything at all on their own. Only enough to be seen for a moment, and then, without any struggle, let go. Yeah, what are they supposed to teach me? Kai asks, and there is an edge in his voice, tired, a little bitter, unwilling yet to be soothed by anything so simple as an insect's light. Everyone I've ever met who talks like you talks eventually gets around to telling me what some small, pretty thing is supposed to mean. I've stopped believing any of it means anything. Tao Yun does not seem offended by this, does not flinch from it the way a lesser patience might. Perhaps nothing, he says simply. Perhaps you only need tonight to watch something briefly lit and entirely unafraid of going dark again. Not because it teaches you a lesson, only because it is a true thing to witness, and you have perhaps not witnessed many true gentle things lately. Kai watches a single firefly rise near his knee, hover there for a long moment, close enough that its small pulse of gold light briefly illuminates the tense line of his jaw, and then drift upward toward the higher branches, its light pulsing once, twice, then vanishing into the dark canopy above, swallowed entirely by the greater darkness without any apparent loss, without any apparent grief on the firefly's part for having gone dark. I keep seeing faces, Kai says quietly, after a very long silence, the words arriving as though dragged up from somewhere far beneath, where he usually allows himself to speak from. In the dark, every time I close my eyes, every single night for 3 years. I know, Tao Yun says, and there is something in his voice, not surprise, not the false, hollow comfort of someone who has never carried a weight of his own, but a quiet recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement of something shared, that makes Kai, for the first time since arriving, actually turn his head to look at the old man beside him, searching his weathered face for whatever it was that just entered his voice. The forest has held soldiers before, Tao Yun says, meeting his gaze steadily. It does not ask them to stop seeing what they have seen. That would be asking them to become someone other than who their experience has made them, and the forest has never once asked that of anyone. It only offers a place large enough and quiet enough that the seeing does not have to be carried entirely alone every single night for the rest of a life. Kai says nothing further for a long while, but as the fireflies continue their slow, unhurried rising and fading all around the clearing, appearing, glowing, drifting, vanishing, appearing again elsewhere, an endless, gentle procession with no urgency in it at all, his breathing, for the first time in longer than he can accurately remember, begins gradually to match their unhurried rhythm. A slow rise, a brief pause, a slow release. He does not sleep that night, not fully, not the deep and dreamless rest that eluded him for 3 years, but something in the hours before dawn loosens in him nonetheless. Some small fractional easing, the first crack of light finding its way, however briefly, into a room that has stayed dark for a very long time. On the 3rd night since Kai's arrival, all 3 travelers are, without any of them knowing it, still somewhere within the forest's quiet reach. May rests now in the small hollow near the stream's upper bend, having decided, without quite deciding consciously, to stay a few more days before returning to the village, telling herself it is only to rest a little longer, though some part of her suspects she is also gently giving her mother's house time to become, in her absence, slightly less unbearable to re-enter. Wen has finally made his slow way toward the farmhouse at the forest's eastern edge that very morning, silver bundle held tightly to his chest, his old legs carrying him the last stretch of the path with a steadiness that surprised even him. Kai remains beneath the cedar, sleeping at last, fitfully, restlessly, but sleeping nonetheless, for stretches longer than he has managed in what he will later realize, once he finally counts the nights properly, has been almost 2 full years. Tao Yun walks his familiar circuit between them all this evening, not out of any particular duty, only out of the same unhurried attention he has given this forest for decades, an attention that asks nothing of the people it moves among beyond the simple fact of its presence. He pauses, as he often does on this particular walk, at the wide, mossy stretch where May's earliest footprints, from the very first night she arrived, are already softening beneath new green growth, the marks barely visible now, more suggestion than shape, the moss having done in a matter of days the slow work it does everywhere in this forest, on every time scale, for everyone who passes through. Further on, near the stream, Wen's footprints from this same morning remain sharp in the mud, not yet touched by moss, still entirely his, deep where his weight settled with each careful, deliberate step, the pattern of an old man walking towards something he has waited 40 years to do. And beneath the cedar, Kai's still form leaves no visible mark at all upon the soft grass where he lies sleeping. And yet the ground beneath him seems, in its own quiet way, to be attending to him nonetheless, the way it attends to everyone who lies down within its reach, marked or unmarked, whether or not any trace remains for others to see. Tao Yun stands for a long while at each of these places in turn, letting the night settle fully around him. The stream's constant, unhurried murmur, the faint stirring of wind high in the canopy, moving branch to branch in a slow, continuous conversation that never quite resolves into words. The cool, mineral smell of the night air, carrying with it the deeper scent of wet moss and old bark, and somewhere further off, the first hint of wood smoke drifting up faintly from the village, small and distant and entirely unconcerned with the quiet dramas unfolding within these trees. He understands something in this moment that he has understood many times before, across many years, though it never grows old with the understanding, never becomes so familiar that it stops arriving each time with its own quiet weight. The forest does not sort these three travelers by the size of what they carry. It does not decide that May's careless sentence weighs less than Wen's 40 years of silence, or that Wen's silence weighs less than whatever Kai carries and has not yet spoken aloud to anyone in full. It only receives each footstep exactly as it falls, no lighter, no heavier, no more or less deserving of the ground's patient attention. It only offers, to each of them, the same unhurried invitation, extended without words, without conditions. Stay as long as you need. Walk further when you are ready, and not one moment before. Nothing here will rush you, and nothing here will forget you, and nothing here will hold what you brought against you forever, no matter how long you take to set it down. This, Tao Yun has come to believe, over many decades of watching travelers arrive and eventually leave, is the truest shape of what some call karma, not a ledger of punishments waiting patiently to be collected, not a debt that follows a person like a shadow, demanding repayment with interest accrued for every year of delay, but simply this: continuity. The plain, unglamorous fact that everything a person does continues on, quietly, into what comes next, sometimes as a scar, sometimes as a lesson hard won, sometimes only as moss, softening a mark that was never meant to be erased, only carried forward, eventually, more gently than it first arrived. He walks on a while longer, past the place where May once traced her fingers along the cedar's old lightning scar, past the low stone where Wen first wept in the dark, past the branch where the owl has taken, in recent nights, to keeping its patient vigil above Kai's sleeping form. Everywhere he walks, the forest continues doing what it has always done, unhurried, unjudging, entirely without need for any of these stories to resolve according to any particular timeline. He returns, as the moon reaches its highest point over the ridge, to his stone beside the stream, and sits and watches the water. Silver now under the moon's light, each small ripple catching and releasing that light in an endless, patient rhythm, and is at peace with not knowing exactly how each of these three stories will end, or when, or in what particular shape. May wakes to a grey, gentle light and the sound of birds testing the new day in short, uncertain phrases. A few notes here, a pause, a few notes there, as though the whole forest is easing itself awake rather than simply switching all at once from night to day. She has been in a forest 6 days now, though it feels, in the way that grief distorts time, both far longer and far shorter than that all at once. Long enough that the ache beneath her ribs has begun, almost without her noticing exactly when, to take on a different quality than it held on her first night here. Short enough that she still sometimes forgets, waking, that her mother is gone, for one merciful half-second before the fact reasserts itself, gently now, rather than like a blow. She rises, stiff from another night sleeping against stone, her cloak damp again with dew, and makes her way to the stream to wash her face in water so cold it startles her fully awake, the shock of it running down through her chest like something almost bracing, almost pleasant in its total, undeniable presence. Tao Yun is there, as he so often seems to be, kneeling at the water's edge himself, rinsing a small clay bowl he uses for his morning rice. Though May has stopped being surprised by his quiet way of simply appearing where he is needed, has come instead to find something steadying in it. The way a person might find comfort in the reliable rising of the sun, without needing to understand exactly how it manages to arrive each morning. "I think I'm ready to go home," she tells him, the words arriving more simply than she expected them to, after so many days of turning the decision over and over without reaching it. "Then go," he says simply, setting the bowl aside, not asking her to explain further, not asking her to prove that she has healed enough to deserve leaving. He does not tell her she is finished grieving. He does not tell her the sentence she spoke to her mother has been erased or forgiven or resolved into something smaller than it was when she arrived. "It still hurts," she admits, watching the water move past, catching the first pale gold of the strengthening light. "It will, for a long while yet," Tao Yun agrees, settling onto a nearby stone with the unhurried ease of a man for whom sitting has become, itself, a kind of practice. Grief is not a debt you finish paying, the way Wen's debt might eventually be settled with a bundle of silver coins. It is closer to a room you learn, slowly, to live inside, not because the room ever becomes comfortable exactly, but because one day, without quite noticing when it happened, you find you have rearranged the furniture so many times, in so many small ways, that it finally feels, if not comfortable, then at least familiar, at least yours. May considers this, watching a heron she had not noticed until now, standing perfectly still at the far edge of the stream, its long neck curved in an attitude of total, patient attention, waiting for something beneath the water's surface that only it can see. "What do I do?" she asks. "With the sentence? The one I can't take back? I keep thinking that if I could just find the right way to think about it, it would finally stop being the loudest thing in my memory of her." Tao Yun is quiet a moment, choosing his words the way a person chooses stepping stones across a river, carefully, but without excessive hesitation, trusting that the next stone will hold his weight once he commits to it. "You let it become part of a larger story," he says, "instead of the whole of one. You were also the daughter who sat with her for 100 other evenings, through 100 other conversations that were patient and warm and entirely unremarkable in the way that only the best evenings between a mother and daughter can be. You were the daughter who read to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself, who adjusted her pillows without being asked, who learned over years exactly how she liked her tea. You held her hand at the end, even after the sentence, even through the exhaustion that made the sentence possible in the first place. That sentence is real. It happened. It cannot be unmade. But it is not the only thing that happened between you, and it does not, on its own, get to decide what your whole relationship with her was." May's eyes fill, but this time, the tears feel different than they have all week. Lighter, somehow. Less like drowning and more like simply, cleanly, crying. The way rain is different from a flood. "Thank you," she says, her voice thick. Tao Yun only nods, the way the cedar might nod if a cedar could, unhurried, accepting, and watches as she gathers her few things. The cloak, now dry in patches from several nights spent near enough to a small fire he built for her, a water skin she fills once more from the stream, and turns back toward the path that leads out of the trees, toward the village, toward whatever comes next in a life that continues, as all lives do, whether or not we feel entirely ready for it to. She pauses once, near the edge of the trees, where the canopy begins to thin, and the ordinary daylight of the world beyond starts to assert itself more insistently through the gaps in the branches, and looks back at the cedar, vast and unmoved in the middle distance, at the stream, catching light exactly as it has every morning she has watched it, at the old monk, already returning to whatever quiet task the morning holds for him, not watching her go, trusting instead that she will go, in her own time, exactly as everyone eventually does. The forest behind her has already begun quietly filling the space where she stood, a bird settling onto the very branch she passed beneath, a breath of wind moving through the grass where her feet, moments ago, pressed their last mark into the soft earth of this place. She walks on toward the village, toward the house that is waiting for her with all its particular silences, carrying with her now not an absence of grief, but something gentler than what she carried in. A story with more than one sentence in it, at last. Wen reaches the farmhouse an hour before dawn, when the sky has only begun to consider lightening at its eastern edge, a faint suggestion of grey easing into the deep blue-black overhead, not yet colour, only the promise that colour is still, somewhere beyond the horizon, patiently on its way. He has walked the last stretch of path slowly, deliberately, past fields he half remembers from 40 years ago. Their shapes change now by decades of different seasons, different plantings, and yet somehow, in their fundamental outline, recognizable still. The same gentle slope toward the eastern boundary, the same stand of old willows marking where the property meets its neighbor's land. Willows that were already old when he last stood here, and are, he notes with a small ache, exactly as tall now as memory told him they would be. He stands at the low wooden gate for a long time before he finds the courage to open it, his hand resting in the worn top rail, feeling the particular texture of wood weathered by decades of hands not unlike his own. Hands that opened and closed this same gate every morning and evening for years. Hands belonging to a man when failed in the specific, quiet way that failure sometimes takes. Not through a single dramatic act, but through the slow accumulation of 1,000 small absences, each one easier to let pass than the one before it. The silver bundle trembles slightly in his old hands as he finally lifts the latch, the small metallic sound of it startling in the pre-dawn quiet, loud enough, it seems to him, to wake the whole valley, though in truth it barely carries past the first row of fence posts. A dog barks once, twice from somewhere near the house, and then a light appears in a window, small, warm, flickering with the particular unsteadiness of a lantern just lit. And a moment later, a young man emerges from the low doorway, perhaps 30 years old, with broad shoulders that carry. Wen notices, with a small ache, he was not prepared for, an unmistakable resemblance to his father's, the same set to them, the same way of standing that suggests a body accustomed to honest, physical work. "Who's there?" the young man calls, lantern raised, sleep still heavy in his voice, in the slight unsteadiness of his stance. Wen's mouth goes dry. He has rehearsed this moment for weeks, walking the roads leading here, and yet every rehearsed word seems, now, to have scattered somewhere between his chest and his tongue. "My name is Wen," the old farmer says finally, and finds that his voice, after everything, after 40 years, after 11 years of knowing it was too late for anything but this, after days of walking and one night lost among unfamiliar trees, still shakes with the same shame it carried the very first season the debt went unpaid. "I knew your father. I owed him a debt I never repaid." The young man lowers the lantern slightly, its light now falling across Wen's face rather than into his own eyes, and studies him for a long moment. Long enough that Wen becomes acutely aware of every year the intervening decades have carved into his own face. Every way age has changed him since the last time anyone from this household would have seen him clearly. "My father spoke of you," the young man says after a moment, his voice carrying something Wen cannot quite identify. Not anger, not quite warmth either. Something more complicated, more considered. Not often, not with the bitterness I might have expected, given how the story could have been told. Mostly he just said your name like it was something sad he'd stopped carrying a long time before he died. Like a stone he'd set down somewhere along the road and simply walked on past, without needing to pick it back up. Wen's chest tightens at this. The thought that his own guilt had outlasted by decades whatever resentment the man he'd wronged might once have carried. The thought that he had spent 40 years serving a sentence that the supposed judge had quietly dismissed long ago without ever informing the defendant. "I have this," Wen says, holding out the bundle, his hands still trembling. It's not everything. It's not even close to what the debt would be worth today, calculated properly, after all this time and everything it might have earned him if it had been repaid when it was owed. But it's what I have, and it's yours, if you'll take it. The young man looks at the bundle for a long moment, then at Wen's trembling hands, then, finally, at his old, tired, deeply lined face, reading it, it seems, for something beyond the words already spoken. "My father would have told you to keep it," he says finally, his voice gentler now. "He'd have said you clearly needed it more than he ever missed it, in all those years he went without it. That was the kind of man he was. I don't say that to make this harder for you. I say it because it's true, and because I think you should know it. Whatever you decide to do with what I've just told you, then let me give it anyway," Wen says, and his voice breaks fully now, the careful composure he has held through the entire walk finally giving way. "Not because you need it. I understand you may not need it at all. Because I need, finally, after 40 years, to put it down. Because carrying it has cost me more than the silver itself was ever worth, and I would like, before I am too old to make the walk here again, to know what it feels like to arrive somewhere with empty hands." Something in the young man's face softens fully at this, some last hesitation giving way, and he reaches out, slowly, deliberately, and takes the bundle from Wen's shaking hands, the weight of it passing between them in a transfer that feels, to both of them, larger than the silver itself. "Then thank you," he says simply, "for finally coming. My father used to say the mountain never closes a path completely. He said it, I think, mostly about you, though he never said your name when he said it." Wen stands in the grey pre-dawn light, empty-handed for the first time in 40 years, his palms bare, unburdened, strange with their own sudden lightness, and finds that the emptiness, rather than frightening him the way he half expected it might, feels instead like the first full breath he has taken in longer than he can accurately remember, a breath that seems to reach all the way down into some part of his chest that has been held tight and small for decades. Behind the young man, in the deepening grey light, the fields stretch out toward the horizon, and somewhere beyond them, though Wen cannot see it from here, the forest continues its own quiet work, unhurried, patient, exactly as it has continued through every one of the 40 years it took him to finally make this walk. Kai stays in the forest longer than either Mei or Wen, 9 days, though he stops counting deliberately after the 5th, having noticed that counting itself had become another way of holding himself at a careful distance from wherever he actually was, another old habit of measuring and monitoring that he is, slowly, learning to loosen his grip on. He does not speak much, even to Tao Yun, though the old monk never seems to require it of him, never fills the silence with questions designed to draw Kai out before he is ready. Instead, Kai spends his days doing small, wordless tasks alongside the monk, gathering fallen branches for the evening fire, clearing debris from the stream's edge where it gathers after each rain, sitting long hours beneath the cedar, simply breathing, simply being looked at by an owl that asks nothing of him beyond the fact of its patient attention. There is something in the repetition of these small tasks, he finds, that his body seems to trust in a way it does not trust stillness alone. The steady, physical rhythm of bending, gathering, carrying, setting down, a rhythm that asks nothing of his mind except to keep pace with his hands. And in the keeping pace, something in him, gradually, over days, begins to loosen its grip on constant vigilance. He notices the forest changing around him, day by day, in the way a person notices change only when they have stayed somewhere long enough to see it happen. The particular angle of morning light shifting slightly earlier each day as the season turns further toward true winter. A stand of ferns near the stream's edge, beginning to yellow and curl at their tips. The fireflies, which seemed so plentiful his first night here, growing gradually more sparse as the cooler nights settle in, their season, like every season in this forest, moving steadily toward its own quiet end. On the 9th night, sitting beneath the cedar in the deep blue dark, watching the last few fireflies of the season rise in slow scattered arcs from the grass, he finally speaks the thing he has not spoken to anyone in 3 years. "I killed a man who was already surrendering," he says, into the dark, not looking at Tao Yun, staring instead at the deep grooves of the cedar's bark, illuminated faintly by the last light of a waning moon. He had his hands up, empty hands. I saw them clearly. I remember them more clearly than almost anything else from that day, more clearly than his face, even. I was afraid, and it was chaos, and everything was happening too fast to think properly. And I told myself afterward that I couldn't have known for certain what he intended, that there wasn't time to be sure. But I knew. Some part of me knew, even then, in the half second before I acted, that his hands were already up, that he had already stopped being any threat at all. I have spent 3 years trying to make that half second longer in my memory than it actually was, trying to find some version of it where I couldn't have known. And I can't. It was always long enough. I always knew. Tao Yun does not flinch, does not gasp, does not offer the easy comfort of it. Wasn't your fault. The words that Kai has heard, in various forms, from every well-meaning person who has ever tried to help him carry this. Words that have only ever made the weight feel heavier, more isolating, because they told him, however gently, that the person offering them either did not believe him or could not bear to. "That is a heavy thing to carry," Tao Yun says simply, after a long silence, his voice carrying no judgment and no false comfort either, only a plain, steady acknowledgement of the weight itself. "Heavier, I think, than anything May or Wen brought into this forest before you. May carries a careless sentence spoken in grief. Wen carried 40 years of an unpaid debt born of shame and avoidance. What you carry is a choice made in a single, irreversible moment against a man who could no longer defend himself. I will not pretend those are the same kind of weight. They are not." Kai finally looks at him, surprised, despite everything, by the plainness of it. No minimizing, no rush to absolve, no comfortable lie offered to make the moment easier for either of them to sit inside. "Then what do I do with it?" he asks, and his voice cracks fully on the last word. 3 years of careful control finally, entirely, giving way. Tao Yun is quiet a long moment, watching the cedar's scarred trunk in the fading moonlight, the old lightning scar visible even now as a darker seam running up through the pale bark. "You do not get to unmake it," he says finally, gently but without softening the truth of it. No forest, no monk, no amount of moss growing patiently over the mark can undo what already happened, what you already chose. In that half second you cannot lengthen, no matter how many times you return to it. I will not tell you otherwise, because it would be a lie, and I think you have carried enough lies already, even the comforting kind offered by people who loved you and could not bear to sit with the full weight of what you told them. Kai's shoulders shake silently in the dark, his breath coming in short, uneven pulls. "But," Tao Yun continues, his voice gentling further, though losing none of its steadiness, "you also do not have to spend the rest of your life being only the man who did that, in that half second, 3 years ago. A life is longer than any single half second, however much that particular half second insists, some nights, on being the only thing that ever happened to you. You can become slowly, over years, not quickly, not through any single act of penance, but slowly, the way the cedar grew its new bark around its own old wound. A man who also did something else, who tended a garden, perhaps, who protected someone else's surrender, somewhere down the years, the way you once failed to honor his. The mark does not disappear. I want to be plain with you about that, because you deserve plainness more than you deserve comfort tonight. But it also does not have to be the whole shape of the tree you eventually become." Kai weeps then, fully, for what feels like the first time since the war ended. Not the tight, controlled grief he has allowed himself in private moments over the past 3 years, quickly checked, quickly folded back away before anyone could see it, but something larger. Something that seems to come from everywhere, in his body at once, his shoulders shaking, his breath ragged. 3 years of careful containment finally, entirely, breaking open. Tao Yun sits beside him through all of it, close enough now that their shoulders nearly touch, saying nothing further, offering only the plain, unwavering fact of his continued presence. The same presence the forest has offered every wounded traveler who has ever found this cedar in the dark, across however many decades it has stood here, waiting for them. The owl, somewhere above, shifts once on its branch, and remains, its golden eyes catching the last of the moonlight, watching without judgment, the way it has watched so many other confessions made beneath these same branches, none of them lighter than this one, none of them heavier either, in the forest's own patient accounting, which keeps no ledger at all. In the morning, the air carries a different quality than it has for days, cooler, sharper at the edges, the particular clarity that comes just before the first true frost of the season. Kai wakes beneath the cedar to find Tao Yun already up, moving slowly along the path with his broom, and for a while Kai only watches, still lying in the nest of his own blanket, feeling, for the first time in longer than he can name, the strange lightness of a body that wept fully the night before, and was not, afterward, punished for it by anything at all, not by the forest, not by the old monk, not even quite as sharply as before, by himself. When he finally rises, Tao Yun gestures for him to follow, and they walk together to the same wide, mossy stretch where May once sat during her first days here, where her footprints, faint even a week ago, have now almost entirely disappeared beneath new green growth, only the barest suggestion of an outline remaining, visible only if a person already knows, as Tao Yun does, exactly where to look. Further along near the stream, Wen's prints from his final morning in the forest are still faintly visible, though softening now at the edges, the moss beginning its slow, patient work on them, the way it has worked on every mark ever left in this ground. And here, beneath their own feet this very morning, fresh prints are forming even now. Kai's boots, worn thin at the heel from 3 years of restless walking. Tao Yun's bare, weathered feet, their shape as familiar to this ground by now as the roots of the cedar itself. Look how differently the ground receives each one, Tao Yun says, kneeling with the same slow care he brings to everything, touching the earth lightly with 2 fingers. This spot barely marked at all, where the ground was already soft and welcoming. This one deep and slow to heal, where grief pressed hardest into unyielding earth. This one already gone entirely beneath the moss, as though it had never been. The forest does not decide in advance how long a mark will take to soften. It simply lets each one take exactly as long as it takes. A season, a year, sometimes I suspect. Longer than any single visitor stays to witness. Kai crouches beside him, studying the layered ground. Years of footprints. Some he can see even now in the slanting morning light. Most he cannot. All of them held somewhere within the soil's quiet, uncomplaining memory. One pressed, atop another, going back, he imagines, further than either of them could ever properly trace. Does it ever forget completely? He asks, his voice still rough from the night before, though steadier now than it has been in years. No, Tao Yun says, straightening slowly, his old joints protesting the movement the way they always do on cold mornings. But forgetting was never the point, only continuing. Every footprint becomes part of what the ground is now. A little richer, perhaps, for having been walked on so many times by so many people, carrying so much. The forest is not what it is despite everyone who has ever grieved here. Everyone who has ever wept beneath this cedar or confessed something unbearable beside that stream. It is what it is because of them. Their weight is folded into it now, the way rain is folded into a river, the way ash is folded eventually into new soil. Kai is quiet a long while, watching a fresh green shoot push up through the soil near his boot, impossibly small, impossibly certain of its own slow arrival, entirely unconcerned with the frost that will, within days, likely claim it before spring gives it a fuller chance. I don't feel healed, he says finally, honestly, without the shame that admission might once have carried for him. You are not meant to, yet, Tao Yun says, settling onto a nearby stone, the morning light catching the deep lines of his weathered face. Healing is not a single morning, however clarifying that morning might feel. It is closer to this. He gestures at the moss, at the layered, patient ground around them, slow and mostly invisible while it is happening, and only truly visible if you return much later, long after you have stopped watching for it, and notice, almost by accident, how much softer the ground has become beneath your feet than it was the last time you thought to check. Kai reaches down and presses his palm flat against the cool earth, feeling the faint dampness of the morning dew still lingering there, feeling the small, hard resistance of a stone just beneath the surface, feeling, beneath all of it, the simple and undeniable solidity of ground that has held so many other griefs before his own, and has not, in all that holding, worn thin or given way. How long did it take, he asks after a while, for the others? When? The woman who was here before me.
I do not measure it that way, Tao Yun admits. Some griefs loosen their grip within days. Others take years. And some of those years are spent far from this forest, in ordinary life, doing ordinary things. The softening happening so slowly and so quietly that the person carrying it barely notices until one day they realize the weight has changed shape without their ever consciously choosing to set any part of it down. I do not think there is a schedule for this. I think there is only the willingness to keep walking and to let the ground do what it does in its own time without demanding of it a particular pace.
They sit together for a long while after that, saying nothing further. The morning light climbing slowly higher, warming the moss, warming the old scarred bark of the cedar nearby, warming very gradually, something in Kai's chest that has stayed cold and guarded for 3 long years. That evening, as the light fades into the long violet hour before true dark, the hour when the last warm gold drains slowly from the western sky and the first cool blue of true night begins to gather in the low places between the trees, Tao Yun sits with Kai one final time beside the stream, in what both of them seem, without saying so aloud, to understand we be one of their last evenings together in this particular way. He speaks now, though he speaks so rarely and so plainly that it feels to Kai almost like witnessing an event rather than simply hearing words. The old monk choosing each sentence with the same unhurried care he brings to sweeping a path that will only need sweeping again tomorrow. There is a word, Tao Yun says, that people from many places use to describe why the past continues to shape the present. Some believe it means the universe is keeping a ledger somewhere, patiently, and will eventually collect on every debt, punishing the guilty in this life or in some other, weighing every act on a scale that misses nothing. I have never believed that. I have watched this forest for too many years to believe in ledgers of that kind. He picks up a smooth, dark stone from the water's edge, worn round by decades, perhaps centuries, of the stream's patient handling, and turns it over slowly in his weathered palm, the last of the evening light catching its wet surface. What I believe, he continues, is only this. Everything continues. A stone dropped into a stream does not vanish when it sinks below the surface, out of sight. It becomes part of the stream bed. The water moves differently now, because of it. Not punished by the stone's presence, not rewarded by it either, only changed, the way everything in this forest is changed by everything that has ever entered it, without exception, without malice, without any accounting kept beyond the simple fact of the change itself. He sets the stone gently back at the water's edge, exactly where he found it, and watches the current continue moving around it, finding already a slightly different path than it held a moment before. Your actions do not disappear, he says, turning to look at Kai directly now, his voice carrying none of its usual softness, only a plain, unflinching honesty. But they also do not sentence you to remain forever exactly as you were in the worst moment of your life. However much some part of you may feel, some nights, that you deserve exactly that sentence. They become part of the streambed of who you are becoming, not erased, not forgiven in any easy sense, but folded in, the way this stone is folded into the water's ongoing path. What matters now is not whether the stone can be removed. It cannot. I will not pretend otherwise. What matters is what kind of water you choose to let move over it from this evening forward, for as many evenings as you are given. Kai looks at the stream for a long time, watching the current move, unhurried, endlessly patient, around every obstacle it has ever encountered in its long life. Every stone, every fallen branch, every leaf that ever caught briefly against its banks before continuing on. Kind water, he says quietly, almost to himself, testing the words the way a person tests a new stone underfoot before trusting their full weight to it. I want to be kind water. Then you already know everything this forest was built to teach, Tao Yun says, and something in his voice, for the first time since Kai arrived, carries an unmistakable warmth. Not relief exactly, but something close to it, the particular satisfaction of watching a seed, planted carefully, finally break the surface of the soil. They sit together as the last light fades entirely, the stars beginning their slow emergence overhead, one by one, in the old patterns they have held for longer than either the cedar or the mountain itself. Somewhere behind them, the fireflies of the dwindling season rise once more from the grass, fewer now than they were 9 nights ago, but present still, their small gold lights drifting unhurried through the deepening dark. Entirely unconcerned with how few of them remain to make the journey this particular evening. What will you do now? Tao Yun asks, after a long silence, his voice gentle again. Kai considers this for a long while before answering, watching the water, watching the last fireflies, feeling in his chest something he has not felt in 3 years and does not immediately recognize, until he realizes, slowly, that it is something close to curiosity, an actual, uncomplicated wondering about what might come next, rather than only dread. I have a friend, he says finally, from my unit. He keeps bees now on the coast. He's written to me more than once, asking me to visit. I always told myself I wasn't ready. I think maybe I'm ready to find out if that's still true. Then that is where the water will carry you next, Tao Yun says simply, not because it erases what came before, only because it continues, the way it always does, toward whatever comes after. Kai leaves the following morning, walking east, not toward the city he came from, but toward a small coastal town he has heard of only through letters, where his friend from the unit now keeps bees in long rows of white wooden hives set among wildflowers, and has more than once written invitations that Kai, until this week, could never quite bring himself to accept. He does not know yet what his life will become, in any detail he could describe if asked. But for the first time in 3 years, he finds he is curious to find out, rather than afraid of what the finding out might reveal. A small but unmistakable shift, the difference between a door held shut with both hands and a door merely closed,
unlocked, waiting only for someone willing to test the handle. Tao Yun watches him go from the edge of the clearing, standing beside the great cedar with one hand resting lightly against its familiar bark, the way he has watched so many others leave over so many years. May, days before, walking back toward her village with her grief now a room she is learning, slowly, to live inside rather than flee from. When, toward his remaining seasons, lighter now by one long-carried debt, his hands, for the first time in decades, entirely at ease with their own emptiness. And now Kai, toward a shoreline he has never seen, and a friend who has never stopped writing to him, and a version of himself he has not yet met, though something in his stride, even now, as he grows smaller down the path, suggests he is no longer entirely afraid to meet him. The forest, once they have gone, once the sound of Kai's footsteps has faded fully into the general hush of wind and stream and settling leaves, does what it always does. It continues. The stream keeps carrying its leaves, fewer now as the branches above grow barer with each passing day, the trees releasing what remains of their gold and rust-colored canopy, a little more each morning, preparing in their own unhurried way for the long stillness of winter that is not far off now. The cedar keeps standing, scarred and unhurried, having added this season as every season before it. One more quiet ring to a trunk already older than any single grief that has ever rested beneath its branches. The moss keeps its slow, patient work over every footprint left behind. This season's marks and last season's, and the countless seasons before that, all of them folding gradually into the same soft, unbroken green. Tao Yun returns to his stone by the water as the afternoon light lengthens into evening, settling into the familiar curve his body has worn into it over so many years, and sits, as he has sat for decades, watching the color shift from gold to amber to a soft fading rose. The same slow procession of color he has watched every evening of his long life in this place. Never once growing tired of it, never once finding it repetitive in the way that might dull a person's attention to something witnessed too many times. He does not know who will come next. He never does. He has learned over the years that this not knowing is itself part of the practice. That certainty about who needs the forest and when and for how long was never his to hold in the first place. But he trusts, the way he has learned to trust very little else in this life with quite this steadiness, that whoever arrives will be received exactly as everyone before them has been received, without ledger, without verdict, without any demand that their grief resolve any faster than grief is willing to resolve on its own unhurried terms. Only this, a place to sit, worn smooth by all who have sat there before, a stream that keeps moving, regardless of who watches it or what they carry while they watch, a tree old enough to have survived its own lightning and to have grown since then, wider and taller than the wound that once nearly ended it. An owl that watches without judging, night after night, confession after confession, never once needing to render a verdict on any of them. And moss, patient, unhurried, entirely without urgency, slowly, gently growing over whatever mark today leaves behind, making room, as it always does, as it always will, for whatever tomorrow chooses to bring. The evening deepens around him. A bird calls once. somewhere in the darkening canopy, and falls silent. The first stars find their old places overhead. Taoyun sits and breathes and continues, exactly as the forest continues around him, exactly as it has for all the years he can remember, and likely for a great many more he will not live to witness. Though this thought, when it arrives, brings him no sorrow at all, only the same quiet, unhurried peace that has carried him through every evening he has ever spent on this stone. Late that night, rain returns to the forest, the same soft, unhurried rain that once fell on May's upturned face weeks before, cool and clean and without malice, though the forest around it has changed considerably since that first rainfall. The canopy thinner now, more of the sky visible through the bare branches, the season having moved steadily on from the deep gold of early autumn toward the quieter greys and browns of its later weeks. It falls first on the highest branches, a soft, scattered patter barely distinguishable from wind, before finding its way down through gaps grown wider now that so many leaves have already released their hold and drifted to the forest floor below. It falls on empty footprints near the eastern path, softening what edges remain of Wen's final morning here. The deep prints of an old man's careful, deliberate steps gradually losing their sharp definition beneath the steady, patient work of water finding its way into every crevice of the disturbed earth. It falls further on the faint traces Kai's boots left near the cedar just that morning, blurring gently what little mark 3 years of restless walking pressed briefly into this particular patch of ground before he turned east toward a coastline and a friend and a future he has only just begun to let himself imagine. It falls on Taoyun, sitting where he has always sat, palms open, face upturned toward the sky he cannot fully see through the remaining branches, entirely unbothered by the cold, his robe darkening slowly at the shoulders, rain gathering and running in thin, familiar rivulets down the deep lines of his weathered face, lines carved, in part, by decades of exactly this kind of quiet exposure to exactly this kind of weather. It falls on the owl, sheltered beneath a wide branch that has not yet released all its leaves, feathers fluffed against the damp, still watching, still without judgment, the way it has watched every creature that has ever passed beneath its perch. Soldier, farmer, grieving daughter, and the countless others who came before them. In all the years this forest has kept its patient watch. It falls on the stream, joining it drop by drop, becoming indistinguishable within moments from the water that was already moving there, carrying whatever few leaves remain on the surface towards some wider river neither Taoyun nor anyone who has ever passed through this forest has seen with their own eyes. And beyond that river, perhaps, towards some sea larger than any single grief could ever hope to fill. However vast that grief might feel, to the person carrying it through these particular trees, it falls, too, on the wide, mossy stretch where 3 sets of footprints, May's, softened now almost entirely into the green, Wen's, still faintly visible at their edges, and the freshest ones, left only that morning by an old monk and a young man walking together in a shared, unhurried silence, rest together beneath the same patient rain, none of them distinguished from the others by anything the rain itself seems to notice or care about, all of them receiving, in this moment,
exactly the same soft and equal attention. Nothing in the forest asks the rain to stop. Nothing asks it to fall harder either, or to wash away more than it is naturally capable of washing away in a single night's patient work. It simply falls, exactly as much as it falls, exactly as long as it falls, governed by whatever distant weather set it moving this way in the first place, indifferent to the particular griefs it happens to be falling upon tonight, and yet in its own wordless way, entirely gentle with all of them regardless. Somewhere in the depths of the night, long past the hour when even Tao Yun has finally allowed his own eyes to close, the rain begins gradually to ease, not stopping all at once, the way a person might expect an ending to arrive, but thinning slowly, the way it began so many hours before, each drop finding slightly more space between itself and the next, until only the occasional patter remains, tapping softly against some lingering leaf far overhead. And then, finally, near the very edge of dawn, without any ceremony at all, without any final crescendo to mark its passing, it simply stops. The forest, in the stillness that follows, seems to hold its breath for one long moment, the way a held breath always precedes the next one, inevitable, unhurried, entirely certain of its own eventual arrival, before releasing, slowly, into the deep, wet hush of a world newly rinsed, every surface glistening faintly in whatever thin grey light has begun, almost imperceptibly, to gather along the eastern ridge. As dawn approaches, grey light easing gently over the ridge, not arriving all at once, but gathering slowly, the way it always gathers in this particular valley, the darkness thinning by degrees until the shapes of individual trees begin, one at a time, to separate themselves from the general blackness of the night. Tao Yun rises from his stone, joints slow and stiff with the damp of the passing rain and the accumulated weight of years, and begins his familiar walk around the cedar. He sweeps leaves that will only fall again by evening, the same unhurried arc his broom has traced through this same stretch of path for more years than he could count, even if counting still mattered to him. He tends moss that will only grow again tomorrow, kneeling briefly here and there to clear a strayed twig, to press back into place a stone that some passing foot has shifted overnight. He keeps watch over a forest that has never once asked him to finish his work, only to continue it, the way the stream continues, the way the seasons continue, the way every true and lasting thing in this world seems, in his long experience, to continue, rather than conclude. But somewhere behind him, in a village he cannot see from here, though he can, if he closes his eyes, picture almost exactly how the morning light must be falling across its rooftops just now. May wakes in her own bed for the first time in a week and a half, and finds that the room feels different than it did the morning she left. Not lighter exactly, not in any sudden or dramatic way, but wider somehow, as though the grief that filled every corner of it before has finally been given enough space to breathe, to settle into something she can live alongside, rather than something that presses in against her from every wall at once. She rises and puts water on for tea, and finds, standing at the same window where she once could not bear to stand, that she can look out at the ordinary morning, a neighbor's rooster, a cart passing slowly on the lane,
the particular slant of early light across the same fields her mother once tended, without the sight of it collapsing something in her chest the way it did before. The ache is still there. It will be there, she suspects, for a long while yet, perhaps for the rest of her life, in some smaller, quieter form. But it no longer occupies the whole of every room she enters. Somewhere east, past fields turning gold and then, increasingly, bare with the last of the season, Wen sits on his own porch, watching a sunrise he does not remember ever truly watching before. Not in the sense of simply being present while the sun rose, which he has done 10,000 times in his long life as a farmer, rising early out of necessity rather than appreciation, but in the sense of actually watching, attentively, gratefully, the way a person watches something they have only recently understood they are still permitted to enjoy. His hands rest empty in his lap, and for the first time in decades, they are entirely at ease with their own emptiness, no longer clutching, no longer guarding, no longer carrying, in their careful, habitual tension, the shape of a deck that has finally, after 40 years, been allowed to become simply a story rather than a wound. He thinks, sometimes, of the young man's face in the lantern light, of the words, "Thank you for finally coming," and finds that the memory, rather than reopening anything, settles instead, like something warm, held gently in his chest. Somewhere further still, along a road leading east toward a coastline he has never seen, Kai walks with a lightness in his step that surprises him more than it would surprise anyone watching from a distance. Not because his past has vanished, not because the half-second he cannot lengthen has stopped existing or stopped mattering, but because he has finally allowed himself to imagine a future large enough to hold it without being entirely crushed beneath its weight. He thinks of bees, of long white hives set among wildflowers, of a friend's letters arriving faithfully for 3 years despite every silence Kai offered in return, and finds himself, for the first time in a long while, composing in his mind the words of a reply he intends, this time, to actually send. And here, in the forest that remembers every footstep, the moss continues its slow work, folding gently over marks both old and new, distinguishing none of them by size or weight, only by the patient, unhurried pace at which the ground has always chosen to receive them. The stream continues carrying what it carries, fewer leaves now as the season turns further toward winter, but carrying them still, exactly as unhurried as it has always been. The cedar continues standing, 1 ring wider than it was a season ago, its old lightning scar no more and no less a part of it than any other feature of its ancient, weathered bark. The owl continues watching, somewhere in the thinning canopy, without verdict, without demand, exactly as it has watched every traveler who has ever found their way into this particular stretch of trees, carrying whatever weight brought them here. The forest does not keep a ledger of who deserved forgiveness and who did not. It never did, and Tao Yun, in all his years of tending it, has never once seen it try. It only keeps this, the plain, unglamorous, endlessly patient fact of continuation. Every footstep becomes part of the ground it presses into,
however briefly, however deeply. Every grief becomes part of the larger story a person carries forward. No longer the whole of that story, only a chapter within it, however long that chapter takes to write itself into something bearable. Every mark softens eventually in its own unhurried time into something a person can finally, gently carry forward instead of being crushed beneath it forever.
Tao Yin finishes his sweeping as the sun clears the ridge at last, spilling its first full light across the clearing, catching the wet leaves and the damp moss and the ancient scarred bark of the cedar in a brief, brilliant gold that will soften within the hour, into the more ordinary light of full morning. He sits once more beside the stream, settling into the familiar curve his body has worn into this particular stone over so many years, and waits, without impatience, for whoever the forest will receive next, some traveller not yet known to him, carrying some grief not yet spoken aloud, walking even now, perhaps, along some road that will eventually, in its own time, lead them here.
The light moves gently across the water, scattering into 100 small moving fragments with every ripple, gathering back into stillness a moment later, over and over, the way it has every morning of Tao Yun's long life in this place, the way it will continue to do for however many mornings remain to him, and for all the countless mornings that will follow after he too has finally been folded gently into whatever the forest keeps.
The forest, as it always has, continues. Somewhere, even now, a new set of footsteps may already be finding its way toward this same narrowing path, toward this same stream, toward this same ancient cedar and the quiet, unhurried monk who tends it. Or perhaps not tonight, perhaps not for many nights yet. It does not matter, in the end, exactly when the next traveller arrives, only that the forest will be here, exactly as patient, exactly as unjudging, exactly as ready to receive them as it was ready for May and Wen and Kai, and for every grieving, uncertain soul who came before them. Across all the years, this quiet place has kept its patient watch. Rest now, if you have carried something heavy into these pages tonight. Let the ground hold what it is ready to hold. Let the moss begin its slow work in its own unhurried time over whatever mark today has left in you. The rest, whatever remains, whatever still feels sharp, whatever has not yet had enough seasons to soften, can wait gently for tomorrow and the tomorrow after that, for as many tomorrows as it takes. The stream continues, the cedar continues, the forest continues, and so gently, unhurried exactly as you are, do you?